Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Jason Tucker, and this is WP Watercooler episode number 290. 10 more to 300, guys. 10 more to 300.
What happened to 300?
Nothing.
Oh,
I think we quit. No. This episode is the one where we talked about acquisitions in the WordPress space. That's the one we're going to be talking about today.
This is the one.
So let's go around this very small room real quick and get everyone introduced. Jonathan, tell us about yourself.
My name is Jonathan, and I work at XWP, and I live in North Idaho. That's about all you need to know about me.
Awesome. Good to have you on. Good to have you on. Russ, how about you?
What's up? I'm Russ. I do stuff at Web Dev Studios and WordPress. And, I have a dog in my room, and it's inappropriate. I apologize.
Well, Say usually has her dogs outside trying to attack each other, or the mailman, or whoever else that's walking around out there. So, Say, how about you? Tell us about yourself.
Hey, first I want to comment that I love the note of existential dread in Jonathan's voice, right? As he's like, I'm Jonathan, I think. Shoot. Why am I here? What is everything? Who am I?
That makes it a lot better. I appreciate that.
Does it make it better? See, when you acknowledge your existential dread, everything gets better. That's a life tip for you.
It's only downhill from here, uphill, depending on how you want to look at it.
Yeah, it's really, there's no hill. You're just.
And if you too want to join in on this stuff, you can definitely join in on this stuff as well.
I'm gonna, even though we're gonna be like out of alphabetical order now, I'm gonna do it anyway. So our post orders, our order by is all messed up. Who am I? I'm Say Reed, and I make WordPress, teach WordPress, preach WordPress at Say Reed Media on all the things. Coming soon, a new thing you can follow, but not yet.
Nice. We're gonna sort by menu order here this time instead of alphabetical order. Mark, you made it. How's it going, man?
Hey. So I hear we're talking about mergers, and I would just like to say it would be nice if people would learn how to merge on the freeway. Is that what we're talking about?
No,
whatever it means to you.
No?
Yeah.
Mark, tell us about yourself.
Let's see. I just got my second workout for the day, and I'm
assuming to the computer.
Running to and setting up the computer and heading up the stairs and trying not to lose my temper with crazy Southern California drivers, and but that's not what I do normally. I am.
That's what you do on the side.
That's what I do on the side. I'm getting really good at it too.
Side hustle.
Yeah. And I am the operations manager for a company called ServerPress LLC. We make a couple of workflow products called Desktop Server and WP Site Sync. Chances are, if you work in WordPress, you've heard of us, and if you haven't, now you have.
Awesome.
If you didn't know, now you know.
This show's about WordPress?
What's that?
This show's about WordPress?
It is about
WordPress. Yeah, water cooler, WordPress.
Yep. It's about blogging. It's about blogging software.
Speaking of blogging, I'm the author of this particular blog. My name is Jason Tucker. You can find me over at Jason Tucker on Twitter. My website is jasontucker.blog. And I do this show as well as another show called WP Blab. We did that yesterday on Thursday. You can feel free to go take a look at that, where we talked a little bit about acquisitions and stuff as well, but we kind of focused it more on the marketing side of things and how marketing is affected by acquisitions. So we just thought, we saw some acquisitions happen this year. We might as well start talking about it. And now we had a big one with Genesis and having that happen. So let's kind of dive in a little bit there. So
I have two questions.
Wait, I have one thing to ask about WP Blab before we move on. One, did you guys talk about Monsanto and Bayer?
No, but we did talk about Wicked Weed and Anheuser-Busch.
Okay, that's not the same.
Yeah. But no, but it's close. It's something outside of the WordPress industry. Yeah.
Anyway,
it's agriculture, right?
Cool.
Yeah. It's all the same.
It's all agriculture. So
So
Russ, what'd you have?
Agriculture.
I have two questions, which is, how do you guys feel about the acquisition, number one? And number two is, do you think I'm going to lose my Genesis lifetime account now that this has happened? Because, I'm very worried about that.
Yes, question. I do. One, yes. Or B, yes. I want to talk about, first let's say, I'm going to play the role of Steve real quick.
Okay, which word are you going to define?
So when we're talking about mergers and acquisitions, Wikipedia says, no, just kidding. I did want to frame the thing, though. What we're talking about, or what spurred or sparked this conversation is that the announcement this week that WP Engine has acquired Studio Press, makers of Genesis. So,
yep,
there's the framework. So we're talking about that. I just wanted to put that out there.
So will Russ lose his license? That's the real question. I mean, you know, and you know, what happens there? I mean, if you have, I don't know, if you have a company that set up something in a very specific way, especially when it comes to, you know, the freebies and the handouts and the cool stuff that happens there, what ends up happening there?
I mean, I was sold on the idea that if I wanted to, you know, build on this theme framework, that I would have this as long as it's there. And, you know, I know that lifetime is not lifetime, you know, but at the same time, it's, you know, I've trusted Lifetime as far as I've trusted Gravity Forums, and they've never let me down. So I thought it would be kind of the same idea, you know.
I thought you were going to say Gravity. Like I trust a Lifetime license the same way I trust Gravity.
Gravity has really let me down.
So
yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I'm personally really interested. It's interesting to talk through the ramifications of this specific acquisition and WP Engine, which has a very interesting history themselves. It's also interesting to talk about the kind of the ecosystem as a whole, because this isn't the first or the last. And I'd say this is a good kind of indicator of what we're going to see more of. So, and what does that mean for this economy, the WordPress economy we all operate in?
The last one that I can remember was Local by Flywheel, right? That was actually something else. Local by Flywheel came out. Yeah.
So GoDaddy's done some acquisitions recently.
Yep.
Ooh, Securi. Yeah.
That was a big
So I guess the question for me, this one seemed like a curious acquisition to me, and I can sort of see a little bit of a connection, like with most of the GoDaddy acquisitions, and certainly with the Flywheel's acquisition of Local, which was AppPresser, or not AppPresser, but Pressmatic. I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm. Not AppPresser.
Yeah, not AppPresser. We love AppPresser, right?
Not yet acquired.
Yeah, not yet acquired. Exactly. Not yet acquired.
Still available for acquirement.
That's exactly. Yeah. But Pressmatic, you know, became Local by Flywheel, and I can certainly see the logic with those acquisitions. This one, I'm kind of curious what everybody's theories are as to why WP Engine felt like.
No, pick me.
Maybe.
All right, this is awesome. I knew you'd all have opinions. So.
I mean, I have a couple sites that are on Studio Press hosting right now, and so like I'm wondering what is going to happen in real time.
Yeah,
that's one of the things I'm curious about. That I feel if I'd researched this better, I'd know the answer to, because I can speak to your opinion on it. But is the ramification specifically for customers, like because the Copy Blogger, like I think Studio Press was owned by Copy Blogger as a partnership,
right. Yeah.
So they had some distinction, but they had the web synthesis and kind of hosting platform that I've had customers on in the past, and I don't know the details of that. But speaking specifically to why would WP Engine be interested in Studio Press? So I don't know, like, how does this impact synthesis or some of the Copy Blogger stuff?
Right.
I'm just thinking Studio Press as a whole in Genesis. I think this aligns really nicely with their move towards a digital experience. They've been saying this, like, we're a digital experience platform for a while now. And I guess disclosure, I'm fairly close with some of the WP Engine folks. We've worked with them.
Ooh, insider information. That's our favorite.
But of course, it's recorded.
Non-attributed sources.
No, we don't record this. It's not even on the internet.
Oh, good.
Okay. This is a Skype conversation. I don't know what you're talking about.
I mean, I have thousands of little fun WP Engine things.
So I'm a big fan of WP Engine as a whole and things that they do. And it's been really interesting to watch their growth and growing pains over the years. And they've been doing this like digital experience messaging for a bit now. And I think this is a good example of the action speaking louder than words, and them trying to build this more holistic, like, because that's been the attraction of these frameworks to begin with, right? Like, hey, we're going to provide this. That's why when I've used Genesis in the past, it wasn't really the technology or anything I was interested in. That was more of a barrier for me. It's more like, hey, I can have this like experience available to my clients for, you know, this good experience, even with a whole lot less cost and effort on my part, and it's good. And
we could debate whether or not we think Genesis is good, but that's a different episode that we have had.
I'm curious as to what this experience is. Is it? I don't really understand it. I mean, I've seen like I've seen things that have used the word experience, and it doesn't really it doesn't explain like because I'm using a web host. I mean, the web host is a server that has a stack of software that's going to make WordPress boot up and be used, and it's going to do that. And so you're adding an extra layer to it, which is now a theme framework that you're able to kind of use that with. So not that just because you signed up for WP Engine, you're going to have Genesis instantly. I don't know how that whole thing's going to work just yet.
I feel like that's going to happen.
Well, here's the thing. This is something that I really want to bring up and talk about. Is I kind of see this as a bit of future proofing on WP Engine's part, because so WP Engine is now a huge company, right? They started however many years ago as a little dinky startup. They got all sorts of VC investment, which, as we know, is all about exiting and all about, profit. That's what it is. So this company has accelerated in that. It's like it's in the Austin, tech environment, et cetera, et cetera. So when they look at WordPress, and especially right now, and we've been talking about this a lot on our different episodes, especially right now, WordPress is kind of in a tenuous space. And no one is really sure which direction it is going. So for a big company with millions of dollars of both revenue and, shareholder, investment and whatnot, or VC investment, they have to protect their experience, as it will, their business, their customers. And so what's the best thing to do? If you see something that could be going off the rails over here, it's actually something that we could also touch on later, is that, with Genesis, with WordPress core, they could in fact fork WordPress at some point and create that entire digital experience. And whether, I'm not saying this is a prediction, I'm not saying it's what they're doing, but it gives them the capability in a way that they didn't have to create something of their own that is a little bit more of its own standalone thing. Probably, in my view, as a bit of insurance, not that it's necessarily going to go that way, but no one really knows where it's going. The managed hosting trend, everyone's kind of internalizing this WordPress software. More and more WordCamps and meetups are being funded and supported by larger corporations and groups. So seeing that, WP Engine doesn't want its future revenue to be decimated because Gutenberg took something off the rails or someone in the open source community is making a decision. So I view it as insurance and protection for them in the future, that if they had to, they would be able to take that whole system and do their own.
Yeah, I've been waiting for somebody to actually do a WordPress.com, lack of a better term, knockoff. I want to, a fully managed, fully everything. You can't get into anything WordPress.
I'm gonna agree and disagree with you. So
my favorite.
So in the truest sense, I agree that we can't predict the future, right? Anything can happen.
Okay, we agree.
So agree on that. But I disagree.
We can't predict the future. That is some awesome common ground we have there.
But I disagree, though, to say that nobody knows where it's going, because I think if we pay attention to what's happening across the ecosystem and look at the track record and look at where the friction lies, where the unanswered questions remain, there's a lot of reasonable hypotheses we can make about what's going to happen next. So
I think that this is a response to some of those fairly reasonable hypotheses.
I think what I maybe disagree with about some of the characterization I'm hearing from you and how you're describing WP Engine is probably not giving them enough credit. I'm hearing you just characterize this more as a
insurance.
Yeah, insurance. And I don't think that's a great characterization.
I'm not saying that's the only reason.
Sure,
by all means.
I think
that could play a factor
as a factor, but I would argue that it's not a primary factor. And this is more about when I look at their track record as an organization and what they've done, and there's some successes, there's been some failures. In general, though, a very positive trend. And when you look at kind of what's happening next, do any of you guys follow Ben Thompson, Stratechery?
Yep.
So Ben's fantastic. He talks a lot about the ecosystem, technology as a whole, and his insights, and when you look at aggregators and the different players and the different types of business models. And one of the things that I expect to see, and we've already seen it in different ways, is these companies like WP Engine working hard to find clear differentiation, right? where we're not a, they're not in the host
between their company and other companies, or in their industry, or what do you mean?
in the like they don't, none of these hosts, most of them don't like to be called hosts, right? Like
yeah, it's a digital experience.
Right. Now then the key question is, how do they back that up? And
no one's gonna sell me on that.
And I believe that WP Engine can and will, and they probably, so taking off my like friends at WP Engine hat for a moment, I would say that they're not like, they got a long ways to go. I see early edges of that promise being fulfilled. And I think I look at a move like Studio Press as them saying, we're working to really back this up and go all the way. They've done some forward projection of what they're going to be. And their sales guys would say, we do this now. I would say, I can see that you can do that. And if you keep going in directions like this, then, and which I expect you will, like, I'm not surprised by this acquisition. It makes a lot of sense.
See that they can do what?
Back up that, like, we're a digital experience. Like, at the end of the day, there'll be people on WP Engine who, hosting, what's that? They're not thinking like that. And that's,
well, I mean, are they also saying WordPress? What's that? Because that digital experience is more of a branded experience that's branded WP Engine. That's kind of, again, it may not be that it's separating itself from the community or removing itself completely. It's just that what are their, if they're trying to create that digital experience in their own little world, you know, are they moving away from that as, no, we're a WordPress host?
I would not say so. I think one of the things
I wouldn't say that either, because they would probably get really mad, but I'm thinking,
well, sure, and it's good to call it you're thinking it, because I think that their strategy is different from someone like some of the other, like a GoDaddy or something, right? Where they're so big and they have multiple parts of the business. They're going to have lots of customers. I can see a future state where they have customers, they have their separate products that arguably could be on WordPress, right? And that's not necessarily important to those customers until it is, because if we all do our jobs well, WordPress is going to become better and more of a thing that's an attracting point in and of its own, right?
Dreams.
So, and there's a lot of good things to talk about in that realm, but I think WP Engine they're going to continue to be all in with this idea of WordPress's value, but they're trying to focus more and more on what matters most to the businesses that they're serving, right? And you see things now in their platform like insights that they're servicing in the dashboard, where they're trying to like give you like, hey, here's some things that are happening with your site, and here's some decisions that you can make based on that.
Yeah, I really see that going as we're gonna be hooked to this open source software and this, as long as we can, and then if that needs to become unhitched at some point, it's like a little sidecar they've got going on. You can't build a multi-million-dollar business on something that is that's the problems that everyone keeps running into, right? With these larger companies. Oh, you totally can. I'm not saying you can. I'm just saying when you're looking 5 to 10 years down the future for VCs, they have different expectations. They're not like, oh, the community is strong. Well, here's, $10 million. That's getting, okay, maybe they do that. But that is getting tighter is my point, is what I'm saying. And that is, I think there's more uncertainty in this ecosystem than there was. I'm not saying it's all going to hell. I'm not saying that that's their plan. I'm saying that it might be a side strategy.
I just want to know what's going to come next, because like when GoDaddy acquired Managed WP and then following that with security, that makes sense, right? Because Managed WP, they have the security feature and it goes hand in hand. And like I could see GoDaddy buying something like Uptime Robot because Managed WP does uptime monitoring and stuff. Yeah. But like I'm very curious why WP Engine went this way. I mean, we know that WPEngine.com itself is on Genesis and it's using a flavor of it. But I mean, like, what is that bonus? Like what comes after that? And that's what I'm really curious of, because everything else that we've seen, like, it makes sense. This follows that to follow this, but this, I don't know where we go.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was just going to say, this is kind of the age-old strategy of when you talk about experience. It's the age-old strategy of give them no reason to go away from our real estate, period, right?
Right.
And so giving them an option for a very versatile framework giving their users that experience gives users no reason to actually stray away from the WP Engine space. So in that sense, it makes sense. I'm more curious about why would that be kind of their first move. I think that's kind of like where I find it a little bit curious. It's not that it completely doesn't make sense to me. It's more why would that be their first acquisition?
I think we're saying the same thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
I
maybe
think,
VideoPress was for sale, and maybe we don't know that either. We don't know that angle.
Like it could just be the right time and the right place, right? Like they were ready.
Sure. Yeah, it was an opportunity and they took it.
Yeah.
I think one thing that with this specifically, and this comes from me, if you've watched the show for a long time, you've seen my evolution, right, as a developer, from being completely, back when we first started, I was like, screw plugins, hard code everything, because it was a different world that we were living in, essentially. But I've always had a bit of an issue with Genesis because of that second layer that it adds, right? That Jason, you touched on that. And so, but I see it has value, especially for developers, especially for designers. What I'm confused about is that it doesn't really relate to consumers. It doesn't make the consumer side easier. It doesn't make the user side easier. Right. So Genesis is for developers and designers. So how are they going to incorporate Genesis into the user experience for WP Engine? Like, is that going to be
maybe they'll just develop their own flavors of Genesis that have like their own theme shop right there on,
and it's all
the WP
included.
Engine space.
That framework is part of it, no matter what, and that's possible.
Last night on WP Blab, we were talking about this, and I was actually using Mark's business as an example of this because I've seen Mark in a room with a bunch of newbies who've just barely used WordPress, and then he's like, "Okay, so we're going to install this software that's going to make it so that you can use WordPress on your computer." No web hosting whatsoever. Just use WordPress on your computer. Let's play around with it for a little while. And then when you're good to go, then you can launch it. And that's where I was kind of comparing his product to Local and Flywheel, and how those types of pieces kind of it's a stepping stone to get you into it, which makes me think that if anything, WP Engine can take this and go, I want to compete with the Squarespaces, the Wix and Weebly's that are out there. And I want to bring in more of the normal folks that are not developer-y, that are not doing any type of agency work, and I can still bring them in. What do you guys think about that?
I wish we could get somebody like John Brown on, because they just acquired themes from it's like Web Savvy or something like that, because they have all those Genesis, and I want to know how that's going to impact him too, because they went ahead and they thought, hey, Studio Press is going to be this thing. Yeah. What is that trickle down effect?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
John, call in. Sorry, he's like probably in like Timbuktu or something.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. To your point, though, Jason, that's exactly what I'm saying when I'm saying they're preparing to possibly create their own experience where it's Genesis theme, or Studio Press themes. Now I have to say Genesis themes, I guess. So it's Genesis themes, and within their own system, within a Squarespace or a Shopify. And that looks like a growth trajectory to me. And look at what's happening with Squarespace and Shopify, Wix, all of that. Yeah. So especially if they're concerned, and let's be honest, the WordPress community is concerned. If we're being honest, we've been talking about it for a year. Everyone's asking about it, all the different word camps and whatever. People are talking about it. We're concerned about where the future of the software is going. Yeah. And we should be, and it's all valid. So if you're a multi-million-dollar company who's looking 5-10 years in the future, and you're looking at not only of Squarespace and Shopify and Wix as your competitors, you're also looking at GoDaddy and Liquid Web and Flywheel and WordPress.com. You're going to be like, if these are all getting bigger, we're all sharing a shrinking piece of pie, or are, they don't know. And so we've got these various tracks that are out there. And so I really think that this is part of that. This is insurance for them to potentially do that if they need to do that. But not that they will, but they could.
Well, but there's always this balance of trying to figure out, okay, when are we getting outside of our wheelhouse and kind of dissolving what our central focus is supposed to be, and then how good can we be at it? I've always kind of had this philosophy of do one thing and do it really well until you've got it close to perfection, and then move on to another thing and do it until you get really good at it. And I realize that these companies are acquiring already other companies that have their own workflows and their own systems in place, and so they don't necessarily have to manage that. But then on the other hand, they really do have to manage it. And so how much does that, you know, spread the people thin as far as resources wise to be able to manage all that?
Well, to your point, you know, with Automatic or buying, you know, WooCommerce.
WooCommerce, yeah.
That is the best example that you have, right?
Yeah.
They are a team of developers who build WordPress and organize this, you know, release schedule, but now they have this other thing. And how are they managing that? It's very interesting because, you know, we've seen how WooCommerce in the last few years has changed drastically.
Right.
I'm not sure. I feel like I used the word Jurassic and Jurassic Park. I feel like I just buried those.
Jurassically,
yeah.
They're very dinosaur-sized acquisitions.
But like we saw that, and I think that was my first kind of wake-up call to like things are really changing.
Yeah.
So
Well,
if
and
we set
even-
aside-
And you have to keep in mind that Automatic is not a traditional corporation. So you have companies like, say, for instance, GoDaddy, who is going to ask after every single WordCamp, where's our ROI for sponsoring this WordCamp? And all these things, because they have shareholders that they have to answer to and all these things. And
Danica Patrick's fine with it all. That's cool.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, but the point that I'm making with that is that when you have all those things to consider and shareholders to consider, you know, they are going to start asking questions, the shareholders are, and say, look, you know, and then if you have like those old, quote unquote, old world corporate ways of looking at things, acquiring other companies and saying we're not going to change a thing, does anybody actually believe that?
No.
We're not going to change. They're not going to change anything tomorrow, but 2 days from now, you know.
That's what Media Temple did with GoDaddy.
Right, exactly.
About Media Temple. They're like, oh, it's going to be the same. It's going to be whatever. 3 months later, it is a completely different thing.
Right.
You know, and now it's disappeared.
Managed WP right now is a complete different beast than it was.
Was 2 years ago, yeah.
I would argue like a couple months ago, it's evolved and it's completely different. And like I like where Managed WP is, but I mean same concept is it's like, you know, we really value these people, we like their traditions, and it's like boom, here's our spin, and you know it's either adapt, die, or use it.
So
here's my question.
Well, hold on.
Yeah, you've been wanting to get in there. Get in there.
When I think about, so set aside WP Engine for just a moment and keep some of the commentary we've had. I absolutely expect more people to do the quote unquote vertical integration, right? Where they're going to say, we're going to go head on to the Wix and the Squarespace, but we're going to do it on WordPress. And it's going to be our thing. We're going to contribute back to the project. What I'm personally interested in doing, or in seeing rather, is that other part happen where they do those custom things. They create those entire plays that people don't necessarily have to know it's WordPress. They probably should because there's benefit. But what I want to make sure happens is they continue to invest in the core project in appropriate ways for them, because that's good for their business.
I mean, that's what creates the innovation of the WordPress core, and that open source community and knowledge and brain bank is not something that any of those companies can have on their own if they separate away from WordPress entirely. And that is what keeps them all tethered, because it's that diversity, it's that literal global think tank, a free global think tank working on software. And as weird sometimes and convoluted and difficult as it can be, that's still what it is. And that is a really valuable resource for any company. It's not something that a VC can necessarily look at and understand or value, but the companies that are in that space understand that value. And so I think that it's a matter of they understand the value and they're willing to do that as long as they see it continuing to grow as it is. But they are also preparing, in my view, in case it doesn't, in case the grand experiment fails.
I don't think they understand the value enough, and that's why I think we need to talk about it more. Because I think there's a bit of like, we create the reality we project, right? And if not enough people continue to invest in WordPress, then the future is a very different one.
Exactly.
Can I just tell you what makes me happy is that I completely, like we said, we know people at WP Engine and they are fully capable. They could have just come up with their own theme and, you know, undercut the market. And I'm glad that they acquired and that those people are keeping, you know, jobs or it's getting acquired. And they didn't just, you know, I'm going to do it better and cheaper and quicker and just, you know, undercut them. I'm very happy for that.
Here's my question. Where are they going to put these themes? Like, where's the shop? Where's the install for the StudioPress themes? Is it in the admin? Is it on the WP Engine site? Is it in the user portal? Like,
I'm
where does that go? Because the way that it's set up now with Genesis, it's not just go get your StudioPress theme in the admin or whatever. So that is a layer that I find
it may be turning into like a Mojo Marketplace type thing for WP Engine.
Right. That's what I'm saying. And that's interesting. I want to see where that goes.
I see
like literally where it goes in the dashboard.
Yeah.
That is it, folks. Russ, if you want to say 2 words, go for it. All right.
We don't know the answer to your question, Russ. Sorry.
I don't know it either. I'm glad we're having this talk, and I want to have it more. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, I want to say thank you very much for all of you guys for coming on the show and hanging out with us and talking with us about this stuff. I do want to say, make sure you go over to WPwatercooler.com/WPblab, where you can watch this exact same type of topic, but on the marketing side of things. We even talked about like this crazy idea of an acquisition of Google acquiring WordPress. I was like, whoa, this is some weird stuff going on here as well. So if you want to take a look at that, Bridget talked about it over there. That's my teaser. Talk to y'all later. Go to our website, WPwatercooler.com/WP or /subscribe, and you can learn how to subscribe to this stuff. Talk to y'all later. Bye-bye.